So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews on episode After the Credits on End Credit Reviews. This is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
And roughly 5 years ago today was the release of the Snyder Cut of Batman v Superman. Well, at least in theaters, they forced them to cut out about a half hour's worth of footage, and then eventually we got the Snyder Cut of Batman v Superman, and sadly, with Justice League, we had to wait a long time, and the Snyder Cut will be out by the time this video gets published. But anyway, this is a 5-year retrospect on the movie Batman v Superman, mainly the director's cut of the movie for more context. And it was released in theaters, and everyone on the internet were at each other's throats just about like they were in the movie, the two main characters were. Which is ironic since that was the main point of the movie. So to understand this, it's best to look at the three main characters of the story and talk about the main theme of division, the real meaning of this movie is, and why it's gotten more positive attention in recent years. So first character I want to analyze is that of Superman. Now, so the character of Superman in Batman v Superman, at least in Man of Steel in the first movie, he had a lot to carry on because he came from a world in which, it was considered like a bad thing to have a natural birth, unlike General Zod, who was, genetically engineered to be just a warrior. That represented, choice in a way where it's more like a natural order. And Zod and his mindset is more about micromanaging and, letting the big, power structure, government, or whatever control people's lives. In fact, in the montage sequence inside the Fortress of Solitude that we see in Man of Steel, when the hologram of Jor-El is telling his son about General Zod and his world, it definitely does remind me of like one of the most murals in like the Soviet Union, especially like Stalin era and Vladimir Lenin, what they would do for those propaganda stuff. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of controversy with the destruction of Metropolis in the climax of the movie, which of course ties in with this movie a lot as well, that people get into, that they do address, that I'll get to as well as with the Batman character. So there's this whole idea of Superman, which a lot of people have talked about. He's kind of seen as a Jesus Christ figure, someone who's all powerful and, dies to pretty much save everyone, and then everyone is pretty much sad when he's gone, and then, he comes back as a resurrected figure. Now, the thing about if you look at, let's say, the Avengers from 2012, when we see this big action sequence in New York City, and there's a lot of destruction, but the way the music's edited and the way all the camera angles, it's all great and grandiose and fun. But if you look at Batman v Superman, a lot of them are at low angle shots where you see more of the perspective of the innocent bystanders being affected by this destruction of these all-powerful people fighting. And in a way, a lot of people would say that it really did harken back to the real-life event of September 11th during those attacks in New York City. And yeah, that really does get into the mindset of really Batman, which does go into the second character, which is Batman. So Batman, of course, is very fearful of Superman because in Man of Steel, Superman says, "You fear me because he can't control me," which of course is with Batman, because Batman, a lot of his power, well, he doesn't really have superpowers, but psychologically his power is really fear. So that's what he does. He basically instills fear into other criminals, which is part of his, why he dresses up as a bat, not just a regular guy, but part of the whole phrase, of course, from like Batman the Animated Series, was that criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. But also the thing about the whole thing that rhymes, so like early on we see him in the mausoleum going to pay his respect to his parents, and it turns out to be like a dream sequence where like it looks like man bats coming out of the wall to attack him.
Right.
And we see a glass painting of what appears to be the Archangel Michael. And the previous scene, Lex Luthor talks about how, I wish that painting was upside down with the angels and the demons. Later on in the movie, when he wants to kill Superman with the kryptonite spear, the way that he has the spear back, like he's about to impale Superman with it, is very similar to that pose, except, so the sword in the glass painting, but with Batman, it's very much like that. So in his mindset, he sees himself as this, I'm doing the right thing, when in reality that's really not the case, that he's just being manipulated. Now, a lot of people talk about the whole Martha scene that happens right during that moment, and looking back on it with Martha, it just kind of jumps him back to reality, knowing that this guy that I've vilified and really have a lot of hatred for, he's a lot like me. We're both really good people at heart. So let Steven jump into this. Sorry, I should let you jump in with the Superman part.
Oh no, that's okay. Yeah, this film, I definitely, in the moment, I felt people are crapping on this when they shouldn't be, because while it may not be perfect, there is a whole lot of artistic merit behind this. And as time has gone on, I've realized how correct that sentiment was, and have been glad to see that slowly but surely it's getting some more positive reception. Maybe not critically, but certainly in terms of the audience being, giving it a chance. And I've noticed a lot of similar themes to what Tyler is addressing. September 11th clearly had a lot of influence on this film, as well as I think something profound about it that pretty much any Marvel movie outside of maybe Infinity War, but even that is arguable. They don't have so much of a theme aside from very, or at least larger political, philosophical theme that transcends the work, other than a very few exceptions, maybe The Winter Soldier and stuff like that as well. But very few examples, and where I think that lots of people will compare Captain America Civil War to this, while ultimately that ended up being just a civil dispute, this ended up being a very interesting... it ended up being an interesting film, and I think an important one for the time. Because you got to think about the fact this was made in 2016 on the precipice of the election, where Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton, the establishment sweetheart goody two-shoe that everyone, even her opponents, expected, she's just going to win because, things are so rigged. And I think Batman is a very interesting and I would say perhaps to the critical class, terrifying character, similar to someone like the Joker portrayed by Heath Ledger or by Joaquin Phoenix, in terms of this sort of this fear that a lot of the general public feels. There's this uncertainty in the air, this feeling of helplessness that a lot of American citizens and citizens around the globe feel, whether it be from climate change, from economic struggles, from just our political reality not allowing us to have a lot of involvement because the tools that were left to us are through things like censorship, big tech, and consolidation of corporate resources. We're slowly losing the grip on our reality. And so this film was made in a very interesting time, and I find it interesting especially that through The Billionaire, a lot of this dissent, similar to a Donald Trump, was expressed towards this false god caricature of Superman. And although in the end he realizes the error of his judgment in that this is, at the end of the day, another person, which a lot of us in our philosophical, political strife can often overlook. That there's a tendency to dehumanize, there's a tendency to just do things to get the quickest results, damned be the consequences. But that's a very external focus on the film. Even in the context of the film, I think, similar to Watchmen, this probably does maybe the second best job of any superhero film I've seen of questioning who watches the Watchmen, sort of thing. There is... you were mentioning that during the time of this film, there was a lot of controversy of the destruction of Metropolis in Man of Steel. And while we both thought that that's really stupid overall, it generally it was genuinely very interesting and I think effective that they took that to heart and said, okay, well, let's make that a central point of this. And Lex Luthor, although I think it may have been a mistake to cast Jesse Eisenberg, unless you want to argue, well, he was supposed to represent kind of like the millennial, basically antisocial millennial, maybe in celibate sort of, or involuntary celibate caricature that is painted. I guess you could do that, but I think there is a genuine argument that, someone like Bryan Cranston or someone probably would have been a good choice just for kind of the context of the social order that was presented in that world that's supposed to be fantastical but darkly rigid like our own in a certain sense. And I think that it is, to this day, the best film in the DCEU that we've seen. Hopefully with the Snyder cut of Justice League, we'll see an update and maybe that notion will be challenged. But it was very interesting in the fact that this film, I think, more than any other blockbuster in recent memory, has done the division so right. The versus is so prominent in this. And although there are disagreements into why it was effective or wasn't effective, that in the end they decided to join sides, it is a fundamentally important work for the time it was made in. You mentioned the Christ imagery, I think, at some point, and I wanted to point out the fact that in addition to what Tyler was saying about the statue, I think earlier in the film, was that what you were drawing, or a particular?
It was a glass painting of the Archangel Michael.
Archangel Michael, yes. So there's that, but there's also the fact that there was lots of crucifixion imagery, such as the fact that at the end of the film, when Superman was killed, Wonder Woman and Lois were framed in such a way that it looked very much like the Madonna and Mary Magdalene at the side of the cross after he had been taken down from the cross, being Jesus. And there was even, if you look carefully, in that shot, a cross off to the side in burnt rubble in the background to signify that. And also, similarly, Batman, the spear that you were talking about, many have compared to the Spear of Destiny, which was the destiny that poked and killed Christ, basically. So I think there's a lot of powerful imagery in here with a lot of powerful connotations that deserve study and ramification, and it's foolish to just brush this off as, meaningless drivel, as people seem to.
Oh, yes, definitely. And the thing is, with what you were saying earlier, how, I was talking about with the whole rhyming thing with Batman, with the, spear, and that, I think he's all, righteous in that. But of course, that's how he kind of been losing himself when it comes to, basically just drinking and sleeping with random women, and also on top of that, just marking criminals and that, which I'll get to, pretty soon with that. With the movie does a great job of predicting, actually more like foreshadowing of Superman's death, because in the beginning of the movie, when we see Batman's parents get killed, the movie that at least that's advertised, is called Excalibur. Now, this movie is not just Zack Snyder, the director of the movie, is his favorite movie, but the way that King Arthur dies in that movie is very similar to how Superman dies in the movie, where he basically gets killed by the main villain of the movie, at least the one that he's doing battle with towards the end, so he can also get close enough to kill him as well. So it does rhyme with that in a way. And it's a pretty good movie. I recommend that movie, Excalibur. In a way, it does remind me of Game of Thrones, but predates Game of Thrones by a lot. And a lot of people forget that Liam Neeson was in that movie when he was pretty young, and that was like over 40 years ago.
Gosh, that is hard to believe, yeah.
Yeah, roughly 40 years. But back to Civil War, it was ironic because these two movies came out within just a few months of each other, and I noticed a lot of similarities with them. I mean, if you want to just rewatch our review on Captain America Civil War or video, why they're basically the same movie. But you know what really bothers me about Civil War is really the ending. And I'm surprised no one really brings this issue up with Civil War. The part when Zemo shows footage of the Winter Soldier killing Tony's parents in the woods, that, you know, sets him off to want to kill Bucky and that. But my question is, it just boggled my mind, like, where is that camera video footage from? Was it from the motorcycle? Was it, if it's on, like, the road? But why would there be a security cam in the middle of this deserted road?
Yeah.
It makes no sense. That's what really took me out of it. I just felt like it was a lazy writer's way to try to get him to fire it up to fight in that. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it really does cop out the end with "I'm sorry, Tony," which they should have just left it with the whole like enemy thing, like, oh, Captain America and these other guys are enemies of the state and that, and then resolve it with, you know, Infinity War and Endgame. But yeah, I've come to this conclusion recently. It's kind of a very controversial one about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in short, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the McDonald's of cinema.
Ooh, I love that. That is a great way to put it.
I mean, they're competent, they're consistent, but they're kind of all the same and kind of overly safe and predictable.
That's fair. What's Infinity War then? Like the best McDonald's thing they ever
The
released?
McRib?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
With the Shamrock Shake.
True.
Yeah, but anyway, so enough with the MCU shade and that. So
McMCU, you mean?
I just call it that from now on.
The McU, yeah.
The McU, the McMCU. The McMCU. Gotta go with that now. Yeah. It's supposed to be a serious video, but keep laughing instead. All right, so I want to talk about who the real enemy of this movie is, and that, of course, is Lex Luthor. Now, I do agree with you, Steven. At the time, I would say I agree with you about Jesse Eisenberg seeing miscast, but the more I thought about it, this taking Lex Luthor was very telling of the time that the movie was made, and more so nowadays, because this version of Lex Luthor is one of the tech giants, and what better way to have someone like a tech giant is to get the actor who played Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network.
Fair point.
And the thing is, this guy pretty much wants to turn these two together, because in his twisted worldview, he's like, oh, I want the demons to be on top, like they're the good, and the angels in the bottom, like they're, the enemies and bad. The thing is, it's like how, evil people, their worldview is very inverted. He really manipulates them with really using people in general, like mainly taking control of victims. Like he hires these people, these thugs, to, kill these like villagers, like burn them in that, to make it look like Superman did it. And when this woman is trying to be useful, Lois Lane is trying to do some really thorough investigating, which is extreme rarity nowadays, and she gets killed in a very, shady way that, say what you want about other, people of higher power have done. Usually we think of, Epstein with that sort of deal. Mm-hmm. But also the other guy who's a victim who really got affected by losing his legs and his livelihood in the climax of Man of Steel that we see in Batman v Superman. This one guy who's a Wayne employee, he lost his legs and he wants to sue Superman. He's really, taking him to court and that and his grievances. And Lex Luthor really puts him up on a pedestal, working hand in hand with a corrupt individual of the government. And with this, he blows the guy up just to torment Superman, to show that, oh, look how, this guy's supposed to be all powerful and good, but he failed to do this. And in the extended cut, they explain the whole, wheelchair is coated with lead, so he couldn't use his x-ray vision to see that. And it just shows in the end that who you are, your background in that, just be wary of people who want to put you on a pedestal, because once you outlived your usefulness, they'll just throw you to the wayside.
Fair point.
Is basically what it was trying to do. So why does Superman and Batman hate each other? So we know Batman fears Superman because he can't control him, and they see him as a very big external threat. However, Superman really dislikes Batman because he feels like he's harming people who are less fortunate, because he is marking criminals, which people have criticized about the justice system, that convicts, who want to actually turn their life around seem like they can't. That's like a mark against them. And then Lex Luthor, using his influence, has that guy killed in prison, and Superman has more of a hatred towards Batman, thinking, this guy had a family and that, he would be alive. He wasn't really that bad if maybe he didn't mark him in that. That's the impression that he got. So in a way, this individual who has a lot of power and influence, and of course playing that montage of people on the news and that trying to create doubt with Superman, is really what it is. And I think more people are waking up to that, especially in the past year or so. People have been really looking at the tech giants and how much power and influence they really have over the masses, whether it be, of course, mainstream media, tech giants, and so on and so forth. We know that it's really about who has control of information is the real power structure. In a way, it's kind of like how in the Middle Ages, when the kings of Europe were really trying to take control of the printing presses by controlling information and knowledge, this is a very similar situation. That's pretty much what I have to say about the Lex Luthor character, but I'll let you jump in on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say, harping on a bit more, I think there definitely is there's a perspective of which you could justify Jesse Eisenberg, or at least someone of his age, was a good choice to play Lex Luthor, because it's supposed to be a young... You could say that Superman, he's clearly younger than Batman in this version. He is a younger living person than Bruce Wayne is supposed to be in this. And so to have a young person blaming all of their failures on this other figure could be, you could argue, a representative of the millennial woe of, I'm being so wronged, I'm such a victim, blah, blah, blah. I could see that, but I would argue that I think it would have been a bit more of a powerful image to have, I'm not even saying Bryan Cranston in particular, but a person more in the age group of Bruce Wayne to have this commentary that I think was kind of the central point they were driving at, that with Superman, the existence of Superman, the fundamental ideals of his reality, and I guess you could transcribe into our world with evolving technology and changes that seem superhuman, we similarly have to raise certain questions that are uncomfortable. And the fundamental worldview and insecurity of Batman, as well as Lex Luthor, are being challenged. And Lex Luthor sees that he can pit Bruce Wayne's, aka Batman's, against Superman in this sort of vindictive punishment against the lawless hero above the law, and really you could see either of them as that description, but in this case it's supposed to be that Batman is the more down-to-earth, down in the dirt, dealing with the real, as opposed to Superman, who, even as he's perceived, is almost this sort of mythological utopian fantasy personified. So you could see that as sort of the old way of thinking being challenged by this new unknown factor, and that scaring them to their core. And I think that would have been reinforced by an older casting decision. But I also just want to say that I think, even more than Lex Luthor, I think that, and I would state for the record, that so far the best, you could say villain, but I would say antagonist of the DCEU has been Batman. In that film. I would say kind of similarly where your decreed statement of Marvel being the McDonald's of film, I would say that the best villain so far, and albeit it was temporary, but was Batman, because of a combination of factors of the time we live in, the context of the film that was raised, and it being so controversial. I think that all of these factors played off of each other really well, and a lot of people weren't able to see at the time because it's uncomfortable, because it challenges their perception of how we've seen things, what we're expecting, And a lot of the people that made these complaints, I know them personally, and some of them may be listening right now. They wanted, whether they admit it or not, they prefer the Marvel sort of kind of soft around the edges model, not fundamentally shaking up, not fundamentally asking the hard questions or trying something quote unquote dangerous or new. And that is exactly what this film did. It did it blatantly, it put its balls on the table, and for some people that's a turn on, and for some people that's a major turn off. But I definitely think that building Batman as this very broken character by a broken system, which, to be fair, we don't know how much of it he is directly behind. That could be answered at some other point. But this fallen hero versus rise of a new one dynamic was very interesting, and created arguably the best, well, at least one of the best villains in modern superhero cinema that I've seen, and that bears more examining throughout time.
Yeah, I wanted to, generally wrap this up with an epilogue, is that the whole thing about the story, the ultimate point is that you may disagree with other people with each other, but realize that they're a lot like you in certain ways. Like, a lot of people are good at heart. There are people who, of course, have flaws about them, but doesn't mean you can't necessarily get along with them. Perfect example, Steve and I, we constantly agree and disagree on various things, but at the end of the day, we're still best friends because we realize the positive things that we agree with really strongly outweigh the stuff that we disagree with. We don't let those negative things really divide us. And sadly, we live in a time, more so, now this year compared to the year that this movie was made, it seems more polarized because people are so like, you gotta go this way or that way, instead of in this very hive mind collectivist mindset, instead of going for a more individualist mindset and just observing things and realizing, I have this idea, maybe more moderation, more in the middle kind of, maybe let's work together instead of just going, far in this direction or far in that direction. And these characters, Batman and Superman, are great superheroes. They really do a lot of great things. It's just that Batman was losing his way, and sadly it was Superman's death that made him realize how much he had fallen and saw, any of his error of his ways. In a way, it's kind of like people have noticed with Spider-Man 3 how people have been re-examining that movie and realizing part of the reason why people didn't like that movie was that it was kind of more critical of Spider-Man. It showed how he was falling with his ego and the Venom costume. I do think that it just shows that people ultimately have been coming back to this movie because they want something that's more meaningful and deep, while the MCU, a lot of people have been losing interest gradually throughout time because they just kind of feel a little bit of sameness, and the fact that Endgame was kind of like this big, climactic event, they feel like, what's the point of watching the rest of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, I guess a point to drive home is that even more than saying Batman being the villain, at least for part of this film, and Lex Luthor being the instigating factor behind the scenes, I would draw attention to the fact that similarly between this film and the time we live in, the villain is the same. It's fear. It's the fear of the unknown. It is the fear of your neighbor. It is the fear of doing anything, taking any action that could be new or different and is scary.
And fear without having control, or being taken control of. Correct.
So I would just say that a good point to conclude this on is similarly, I would also draw the fact that, as you stated earlier, Tyler, Batman's, the thing Batman claimed, his claim to fame and his quote-unquote superpower, if he had one, was fear, and he let it get to him. So let us follow the example expressed in this film and not let fear get the best of us.
Yep, and I'm going to end on a quote here. I'm going to quote the individual who said this, or likely said this, is that with, Steve and I have been talking about in our video, especially with this one, is that strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and weak minds discuss people.
Well put.
Yep. All right. That was a really nice video. So anyway, this is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Steven from Steven Lawson Studios.
Yes, we hope you enjoyed this episode after the credits on Anchor Reviews, or at least this kind of, discussion that we've had. It's a pretty deep philosophical one that it's nice that we're able to both hear each other out what we thought about this movie, and we hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe.